Welcome to This Week in Hell. I'm Professor Bond Ruggles, and on This Week in Hell, we're going to be answering the question, why shouldn't we blame Helen of Troy for the Trojan War? For as long as I can remember, I always heard that Helen of Troy was responsible for starting the war. However, when you look at history very deeply, as you do when you become a professional historian, you realize rather quickly that a lot of the tales we hear, right? George Washington couldn't tell a lie. He had wooden teeth. The oldest profession for women is sex work. And of course, that Helen of Troy started a war. Why is this wrong and why does it matter? Well, let's talk about what life was like for women during the ancient times. Women did not have positions of power, even if they were seen as royalty, even if they were married to a king. He might have her as a confidant, but that doesn't mean she had any real power. What the war was really over was male egos. And of course, anytime male egos are involved, rather than take accountability, they tend to blame the woman. Helen of Troy did not start a war. Helen of Troy made a choice independent of what the men wanted her to make. And for that, they chose to fight each other. Throughout history, many historians have been men. And for a long time, like any field, that's all they were men. And when they look at history, they say, oh, look at this. Another woman has stirred the pot and made men go crazy. Well, we don't make men go crazy. Men are responsible for their own actions and their own emotions, independent of what we do or what we feel. And yet, despite that being the truth, throughout history, we see numerous examples of women being the scapegoats for male behavior. And that is why Helen of Troy gets the credit for starting the Trojan War, basically being accused of adultery and moving out with the man she was, being an adulteress with, and therefore her husband had to come and reclaim her. That's the key word right there, reclaim her. Right? That's what women's existence was like in ancient times. Something to be claimed, something to be possessed, something to be owned. That is why we can't actually blame Helen of Troy for the Trojan War. Did she get used as an excuse to start a war? Sure. But you know what? The war was already kind of going on. She may have just given them a new manifesto to continue fighting over. Now, we still hear in modern times that Helen of Troy is to blame. That's because a lot of people don't study ancient history. But once you take a solid look at it, it becomes very clear that Helen of Troy couldn't have started a war because she was a woman and didn't have the power to do that. Thanks so much for joining us on This Week in Hell. See you next time.